Hachette Audio presents Soyangri Book Kitchen, written by Jee Hye, translated by Shana Tan, read by Sophia Jin. Prologue. As the sun rose, the early morning sleet on the bare branches of the plum blossom trees melted into a glistening sheen. Under the pale sunlight, the surroundings seemed to brighten. While winter still held a tight grip, fresh spring air was beginning to seep through its cracks, heralding a new season. It was 2 p.m. Yoojin, who was inspecting the tiling work, suddenly looked up. A sweet, somewhat distant fragrance was drifting in from the windows, which she'd opened as wide as possible to air out the smell of cement and paint from the new building. Outside, the trees, which stood firm, rustled their pale green leaves in greeting. Clusters of tight blossom buds hung from the shaded branches, while the ones that basked in the sunshine were plump with water, their droopy heads rising like children stirring from a nap. Yoojin walked over to the windows. With a gentle push, the brand-new insect screen glided open with ease. The wind from the mountains rushed in, filling the room with its subtle scent. Her gaze landed on the snowflake-like petals, and she realized with a start that it was her first time seeing plum blossom flowers up close. The petals were the same shade of white as the tiles in Soyangri Book Kitchen, her shop which was almost ready to open. Behind the trees, the white bedsheets she'd washed and hung outside for their book-stay guests flapped in the breeze. Was the scent from the flowers or the fabric softener? She inhaled deeply and relaxed. Turning away from the windows, her gaze swept over the book cafe. Being surrounded by bookshelves that took up the entire wall made her feel like she was inside a doll's house of sorts. The LED lights cast a warm glow on the bare shelves, illuminating them like an empty stage. May the smell of books fill this space. She glanced at the A3-sized paper taped to the wall. The floor plan for the book cafe was filled with markings and tiny notes scribbled on the side, reflecting the countless rounds of revision and the careful thought that had gone into it. The crumpled edges gave it a worn look, making it seem out of place when everything else was brand new. Yoojin stretched out a finger and rubbed gently on a penciled scrawl. What had once been just a floor plan and a 3D simulation model on the computer was now the building she was standing in. In addition to the bookshop, which doubled up as a cafe and event space, Soyangri Book Kitchen would also be running a book stay, accommodation for those looking for a getaway from the hustle and bustle of life. Of the 4 two-story buildings it occupied, 3 were guest houses, and the building in which she stood now housed the book cafe, as well as all the staff on the upper floors. From a bird's-eye view, with a garden and a botanical glasshouse in the center, the compound looked like a cross. The book cafe's floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered a panoramic view of the picturesque Soyangri village. Behind the plum blossom trees, one could make out the meandering mountain ridges in the distance. Gazing at their majestic yet gentle curves, Yoojin sometimes wondered if she was living in a dream. As a Seoulite born and raised in the city, Yoojin was more used to tall, sharp-edged skyscrapers, 24-hour convenience stores, chain cafes, a sprawling subway network, and high-rise apartment buildings. Yoojin 누나, come check if we've got this on properly. From outside, Shiwoo called out to her. Okay, 1 second. Yoojin closed the insect screen with one hand and stuffed the tape measure into the front pocket of her apron before hurrying outside. Shiwoo and Hyungjun were holding a 2-meter-long banner across the facade of the coffee kiosk next to the building. Opening soon, Soyangri Book Kitchen, taking reservations from 1st April. Below the bold letters was a phone number and their Instagram handle. "Looks good. Wait, let me take a photo," Yoojin said as she fished out her phone from her apron. Her shot turned out blurry, but since she was only checking if the banner was straight, she didn't bother taking another one. What she couldn't predict in that moment was the regret she'd come to feel several seasons later, when she happened to look back at that hazy shot of Siwoo, his bangs windswept and a wide grin plastered across his face, while Hyungjun wore his usual poker face. Siwoo, her cousin, and Hyungjun, who was born and raised in Soyangri, were her full-time employees. Like two ends of a seesaw, they were polar opposites. Siwoo was an extrovert with a short temper, while Hyungjun was quiet and preferred to keep to himself. It'd be nice if they could find balance in each other, she thought wryly, as she watched Siwoo run towards her eagerly to check out the photo, while Hyungjun ambled behind. "Siwoo, don't you think it's a little high on the left side?" Siwoo tilted his head a fraction. The stone foundations of the storage shed that originally stood there weren't level in the first place. Maybe that's why. "Hyungjun, what do you think?" "Looks fine." "Right?" The two men high-fived, grinning. Despite their differences, in moments like this, they were like twins with a shared soul. Yoojin chuckled to herself and turned to survey the place. Soyangri Book Kitchen sat at the foot of the mountain. The four modern buildings stood out in the rustic landscape, like items that suddenly pop up in a video game. For a moment, she lost her bearings. Where was she? What year were they in? Which day of the week was it? It had been a 10-month journey to build everything from scratch. But it was as if she was going to wake up any moment and not remember a single sliver of the dream. If someone were to ask her why she had decided to open a bookshop in the countryside, Yoojin didn't have a prepared answer. True, she had often quipped about wanting to retire in a quiet place with greenery and spend her days reading, but never had she quite imagined that, at only 32, she'd be running a book cafe as well as a guest house in the countryside. But from the moment she had decided to buy the piece of land, it was as if she'd been swept up in a whirlwind. She had rushed to complete the paperwork required to register the business and to pay the deposit she'd sold her office-style studio apartment. Then she had been on tenterhooks, waiting for the bank to approve her mortgage loan before selling off almost all the shares in her portfolio to pay for the necessary permits and begin construction on the site. To obtain the operation license for a cafe, she had to undertake the requisite training, and thinking that she should at least know the basics of coffee brewing, she signed up for barista classes also. Often, she stayed up till the small hours of the morning to look over the floor plan with the architect firm recommended by Siwoo. Much time and effort had also gone into curating the books for the book cafe, as well as designing and producing their in-house merchandise, like mugs, notebooks, and tote bags. To select the furniture, lights, and appliances, she had thumbed through countless interior design magazines and surfed the internet for inspiration. Even landing on the name Soyangri Book Kitchen had taken Yoojin 2 whole weeks. She wanted a name befitting of a place filled with books. Drawing inspiration from the idea that every book has a unique flavor that would appeal differently to its readers, she hoped that by naming the shop a book kitchen, it would become a space where people could enjoy some reading time and rest their weary hearts. Like how food comforts the soul, she hoped, too, that the delicious smell of paper and books would make her guests feel comfortable enough to shed the burden of bottled-up feelings and to embrace some moments of solace and warmth. When the flurry of activities had finally begun to settle, it felt as though she'd emerged into a strange new world. Suddenly, she felt a gnawing hunger. She had barely eaten breakfast, just half an apple and a day-old donut. The books she had ordered were supposed to arrive that morning, so she had planned to wait for the delivery before getting lunch, but it was already past 2 and there was no...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?